Hello, my name's Tom, and we're back talking about F1 Fantasy. We've just had Baku, Azerbaijan, and we're going into Miami. So it's time to look at the team selection going into Miami. Naturally, things aren't going to change very much because of the pricing, and we're kind of a little bit stuck with the two towers of Red Bull and Aston Martin. But I'm going to discuss my thoughts and feelings about how things are anyway. Have a quick look at what happened in Baku, see if that impacts how we're going to take on Miami. I'm also going to have a quick look obviously at the budget drivers, because the budget drivers are the main differential that we have at the moment, and see who the most important budget driver is, because it's kind of the main, if not only, decision we already have. Obviously the other decision we have to include is the DRS boost, who to pick it on. Kudos to anyone that put it on Sergio Perez this past weekend. For me personally, I think I'll continue going for Max Verstappen, but we'll discuss that soon. And the other decision we have to discuss or think about at least is when to use the chips. And those are going to be our biggest differentials across the season. Because at the moment, I've had barring the Guan Yu Zhou DNF in Baku or whatever, I've had pretty much an almost perfect start to the season. Like my DRS boost has returned in every race so far. I've had the DNF from Stroll and Guan Yu Zhou hit me a couple of times, but apart from that, everyone's just done extremely well, and yet I'm still outside the top 100,000 in the game. So that tells me that obviously, first of all, that a lot of people have been using their chips and got ahead of me, but also there's going to be people that have been kind of lucking out on the budget picks and they've not been hit by the DNFs. So it's really, I think the top sort of 100 or so thousand teams are probably all going to look really similar. So my advice for the time being is to just keep patient. It's a long season. We've only had 4 races. There's potential for the guys behind the game to change things around. They might change the pricing. I don't think they will, but there's a potential for that to happen, which could cause chaos and completely reconfigure our teams. But in the meantime, I think it's important to stay patient. Don't get bored with the game and therefore just make changes for the sake of it, because I think that's exactly how you're going to end up losing out. So kind of stay boring and keep picking the same sort of teams. But let's get into the team selection anyway. Let's have a think about what we want to do. So let's have a quick look at what happened in Baku. So you can see the sprint race results here on the left in the light blue, and then on the right hand side we've got the race results. Perez absolutely hauled in 61 points. Like I say, big kudos to the guys that put the DRS boost on him or use the autopilot. Good opportunity to use it. I sort of half considered it, but didn't really fully consider it, I guess. But yeah, I think there'll be plenty of other opportunities to use the autopilot chip, which should help us out later on in the season. So, but if you've used it already in Baku, then it's worked out pretty well for you. So yeah, and then apart from that, we had the 2 DNFs for a couple of the rookies. Well, I'll call Guan Yu Zhou a rookie. He's not actually a rookie anymore, but still got the DNF. He was in my team. I deliberated long and hard between Guan Yu Zhou and Alex Albon. In the end, the total point difference was 12 points, which is reasonably significant, I guess. But when you're scoring over 300 points, it's not the biggest issue if you didn't quite get the right budget driver on this weekend. But over a period of several weeks, if you're not picking the right budget driver, then it's going to accumulate and you're going to end up dropping back in the ranks a little bit. So like I say, even though I had a really good week this week, I actually did drop back a few thousand places, probably because people were triple DRS boosting Perez and Verstappen or whatever. So anyway, that's enough about Baku. Let's think about Miami. So at the moment, this is the team. We got the 2 towers, like I say, Red Bull, Aston Martin, and a budget driver. I did deliberate quite a lot about putting Pierre Gasly in my team over Lance Stroll, and I think actually if we quickly have a look at the statistics for Gasly at the moment, we can see Gasly, he scored 44 points across the season, and Stroll has scored 42. So Gasly's actually outscoring Stroll. However, that it did have the DNF for Stroll in Saudi Arabia, and the DNF wasn't really a DNF for Gasly in Australia, so he didn't get the negative points for that. Quite fortunate for his fantasy managers. And I think the reason Gasly's actually outscoring Stroll, apart from the Stroll DNF, is the fact that Gasly has been starting the race out of position and is able to make up positions and overtakes. And if we scroll down, we can look at that down here in the overtakes section. We can see Gasly positions gained. He's gained 14 positions over the course of the season so far and 23 overtakes. That's a lot of overtakes. In fact, it's the 3rd highest after Guan Yu Zhou with 29 and Magnussen, little dark horse down here, with 25 overtakes. So yeah, Gasly's making up a lot of points there. You can put that to Stroll, who's only seven positions gained and 13 overtakes. But if you're deciding, there's a big decision. A lot of people out there deciding between Stroll and Gasly. I think going forward, I still think Stroll is the better pick. Stroll is more likely to finish higher up in the top 10 where the main points are. Gasly isn't going to consistently be on the starting grid at like P19, P20 pit lane and then jump forward to like into the points. It's not going to happen very often for Gasly. The Alpine doesn't look as strong as we thought it might do. And I think on an average weekend when Gasly qualifies where I think he belongs, which is probably P9, P10, P11, somewhere in that region, the best he can hope for in a race is going to be like, again, same sort of position. Maybe he moves forward a couple of positions because of DNFs or gets a bit lucky with strategy or whatever. And then we're looking at Gasly finishing like P7, P8. And even then, he's not going to score very big fantasy points. And whereas Stroll, he's shown good consistency so far. The Aston Martin looks reliable. And I think he's more likely to finish in the top 10, qualify in the top 10 and also finish in the top 10, therefore get those points for actually finishing the race. And that, I think those are much more reliable, steady points than relying on Gasly getting overtake points. So yeah, I think Stroll is definitely the pick for me there. And then in terms of the budget drivers, like I say, it's between Guan Yu Zhou and Alex Albon for me. And I want to bring up a little graphic to show you what I'm kind of deciding between at the moment. So we can see here, we've got on the screen, you've got the 6 budget drivers who are affordable. I've gone from Alex Albon down because I think pretty much everyone can afford Alex Albon down. You might be priced out of Alex Albon, which is another reason why I'm going to mention in a minute about how I'm very much considering Alex Albon for Miami. But yeah, you can see here on your screen the budget drivers points per race. It's the average points per race. And I say points per race is actually points per race weekend because I've kind of lumped the sprint and the Azerbaijan Grand Prix together. So to give us these averages, kind of lump that together. So yeah, we can see per race, Alex Albon is actually averaging minus 4.3 per race, which is quite frankly shockingly terrible, awful, horrendous in terms of fantasy. That basically means if you had Albon in your team from the beginning of the season, he's sucking up 4.3 points. He's taken away that many points from your team each weekend, which is terrible. So you might be thinking, Tom, why are you then considering him in for your team in Baku? I'm going to get onto that in just a minute, but let me just go through the rest of the guys here. So we've got Tsunoda at 2.8 points per race, which is kind of fine, whatever. Guan Yu Zhou, who's been the standout pick so far in terms of budget options because of his overtakes. Like I say, he's the top overtaker of everyone so far. However, I am concerned by Guan Yu Zhou's, or more concerned about Alfa Romeo's lack of race pace. We saw in Baku really underperforming. On average, they're not really gaining positions. If anything, they're more liable to dropping back in the race, which is a little bit of a concern. Yeah, so Guan Yu Zhou is a little bit like, I don't know, do we keep picking him based on his overtakes? Potentially, but I think more importantly, we need to avoid the DNFs. And if Alfa Romeo are going to start showing DNFs and the possibility of falling back in the race, I don't really want Guan Yu Zhou as my budget option. Past that, we've got Hulkenberg averaging 3.3 points per race, but that is probably due to the fact he's not actually DNF'd yet, which is great. That's what we want to see. But the fact he's actually falling back in the race means, in general, he's not really picking up the points. And I do think no one's going to go through the season without DNFing. And I think at some point Hulkenberg will DNF and suddenly his average is going to plummet and it's going to be like similar to Albon's probably. And then you've got Sargent, again, he had the DNF in Baku, minus 0.5 in De Vries. He's had a really bad start to the season, poor guy, 0.8. Points per race. So yeah, those are the budget options, and that means on average, I've averaged this out, so we can see the total overall budget, what the budget options are providing us. So this is averaged out, and it's given us across these 6 guys, they're averaging 1.4 points per race, which is quite frankly terrible. So instead of worrying about what we want our drivers to produce from a budget, I think we need to start thinking more about avoiding the DNF. The DNF minus 20 is huge, and it really does affect the points per race. So in fact, if we have a quick look, we compare that to the guys in the top 6. Into the top 6 average there, 27.2 points per race. Look at the difference between the top 6 guys, how many points they're scoring, and the bottom 6 guys. This is a vast contrast to last season when the budget guys was obviously not quite up to the standards of the top 6 drivers, and even in fantasy points, but it was a lot closer than that. Because the budget drivers have really few and far between options to score points, it's extra important to avoid the DNFs. So why then am I thinking of picking Alex Albon? Let me actually, let's get rid of this, and then we can go back to my team. You can show. Let's stick them in here. For my team, this is kind of maybe team specific, I guess, but you can see if I add Alex Albon in here, I can afford him exactly. I've got the exact right money, and there's a risk if I don't have Alex Albon in Miami and going forward, and then it suddenly sort of becomes clear in the next race or two that Alex Albon probably is the best pick in terms of reliability and potentially even fighting for points on occasion. then Alex Albon is going to be priced out of my. I won't be able to afford him. I literally won't be able to afford him without dropping someone like Lance Stroll down to like a Kevin Magnussen or something, which isn't like the worst thing in the world. But I'd much rather have Lance Stroll than Kevin Magnussen. And so for my team specifically, and for anyone else out there can still afford Alex Albon with this team structure, you might be priced out of being able to afford Alex Albon very quickly. All it's going to take is Albon to go up 0.1 in Miami, and you're priced out straight away unless you've got a couple more points in the bank than I do. So I think going forward, because I want the opportunity to, if Alex Albon is the answer to the budget dilemma going forward, then I want him in my team when I can afford him. And if he continues to drop price, then it's whatever. But if he does well, then he's in my team, and I can, I don't have to worry about being able to afford him. So I do think, although he's at, I just showed that other graphic a minute ago where he had the worst points per race, it was hit by 2 DNFs, and yes, one of the DNFs was his fault. The other DNF was a reliability issue. But in general, I think the Williams is actually very reliable. Last season it had really good reliability, and we've only had the one reliability DNF from them so far this season. And in general, I trust Alexander Albon. I do think he's a good driver. He's had lots of experience. He's raced for Red Bull, although he didn't have the great time of it there. I do think I trust him, and I think he can also, on a good weekend, he can actually fight for actual points, although those points are going to be, the scraps, like 1, 2 or 3 points, probably at best on a given weekend. I still think that he could be fighting for those points, and in general, I think he's less likely to DNF. The only downside, or more reason that he might DNF, is the fact that in general he'll be starting because he's good at qualifying and out qualifying the pace of his car. He's going to probably qualify on average, around P12, P13, P14, which is in the meat grinder, which is a little bit of a risk, on lap 1 in particular. But I think in general, Alex Albon is someone I trust, and despite the numbers not backing up that so far, I do think that Alex Albon is probably going to be in my team for Miami because, like I say, I'll summarise my thoughts. First of all, because I don't want to get priced out, I want him in my team. If he goes up in price by just 0.1 more, I won't be able to afford him. And secondly, I do think he's reliable. Even though he had that issue in Australia, which spun him off and DNF'd him, I think in general he should be reliable, and I think the Williams in general should also be reliable, and therefore, it's kind of, picking from the best of a bad bunch. The other options down here, someone kind of interesting is Hulkenberg. In fact, I've got a quote from Gunther Steiner. Can I bring it up here on here? There we go. It's a bit difficult to read on the screen there probably, but so this is from Gunther Steiner, the team principal at Haas, speaking after Baku, and he said, coming back into Miami, where maybe for our car it's even better being a medium downforce circuit. So Steiner dropping some hints there that he thinks that the Haas is going to be a good car for Miami, and the Haas actually did pretty well in Baku. Like Magnussen in particular scored really well in Baku. He did some nice overtakes. I think if you can't get Alex Albon, or you don't want Alex Albon, then obviously Magnussen would be a great pick, but he's too expensive because he's showing really good overtaking skills, Magnussen. But I think Hulkenberg, this could be the week where Hulkenberg scores quite well in fantasy, because if he continues to qualify well, and Steiner's already dropped hints that he thinks that Haas should perform well here, and he was happy with the performance in Baku, and I think Hulkenberg could be in that contending for Q3 and then contending for points as well, and therefore maybe worth a punt if you can't afford the likes of Alexander Albon. But otherwise, unfortunately, I've spent the last 10 minutes probably talking about budget drivers and not much else to talk about. DRS boost, I guess we can discuss, because obviously Perez is in a lot of people's minds for the DRS boost. For me personally, I'm going to keep it on Max Verstappen going into Miami, even though Miami is another street circuit and everyone's obsessed with the fact that Perez is good around street circuits, and it's true, he is good around street circuits, but it's Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen is, I can't get my head around the fact that we can just put double points on Max Verstappen every week without even having to think about it too much. And yes, if you want to go a bit differential, it could pay off like it paid off in Baku for DRS boost in Perez, but I think in general across the season we're going to get more success DRS boost in Max Verstappen, and unless I see some real reasons through the practice sessions as to why I shouldn't be DRS boosting Max Verstappen, I will keep it on Max Verstappen, and Perez will just sit there accumulating points in terms of just being a driver in my team and as part of the constructor for Red Bull. The rest of the team, again, it kind of speaks for itself until we see some upgrades coming. We know Mercedes are bringing upgrades in Imola, which is the race after Miami, so please God, can Mercedes like shoot to the front of the grid and just like win all the races, just so we can change our teams around a little bit, because I think Hamilton would be a really great pick in fantasy this season. He's got a really good average points per race. He's performing well in a car that's clearly not suited well to him. It'd be great if Hamilton was affordable, but the sad truth of the matter is Lewis Hamilton costs 23.8, and the only way we can get him in our team right now is probably dropping Max Verstappen or dropping Perez and then cutting down on some other asset, and it's just not worth it whatsoever. So yeah, unfortunately we can't really pick the likes of Hamilton or Leclerc, to be honest, or at least I can't. I think this is the best team. So yeah, going forward, I think this is what I'm going to be doing. In terms of chip usage, in Miami, I am not going to be using any chips, most likely. I haven't actually checked the weather, but I imagine it's probably hot and sunny there. Who knows? If it's raining, then it might be worth considering no negative chips out there, or autopilot indeed could be an option if you're worried about your DRS booster crashing out or whatever. But I think in general, I'm just going to save those sort of things for further sprint races. Yeah, so I'm not going to use any chips this coming weekend. DRS boost is going on Max Verstappen. I think Alexander Albon is coming into the team unless something bad happens in the build up in the practice sessions. And that's kind of where I'm at the moment. And then we've got Imola, like I say, Mercedes upgrades. Hopefully we'll see some upgrades from other teams, and Aston Martins will be put under a little bit of pressure, and then it might force us to tweak our teams, maybe, probably not, who knows. But yeah, that's kind of all my thoughts kind of spilled out. And again, I'm sorry that most of these videos are me talking about the best budget driver, but at the moment that is literally the differential that we have going forward, and I think yeah, Albon is the one for me going forward for now. If not Albon, then Guan Yu Zhou, but we'll see how the practice sessions go as always. But that sums up my thoughts and feelings on the game at the moment for the time being. So thanks very much for watching again. Please give the video a like if you liked it, and you know, all that stuff. Subscribe, comment. I like reading the comments. I do my best to reply to as many comments as I can, but I am busy. So yeah, I'll do my best to reply anyway. And thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you soon for some more F1 Fantasy chit chat. See you soon. Bye bye.